questions, stop, and I'm going to record. So hopefully you saw some value in sharing and reading aloud. And I want to see how valid that hope is. So for those of you who are here in the big room, any takeaways that see any immediate, you might need more time to reflect on it, but any of you see any value in what you just did?
Yeah, I think reading it out loud. Sorry. I think reading it out loud really helps the how somebody else might read it because you can get caught up with how you say words and how it sounds to other people.
Yes. Okay. Anybody else notice either some benefits for reading aloud or even listening?
I think that reading out loud allowed me to like just go over it again in a way that I hadn't been able to yet, so that I could look for any errors or look for any areas that needed to be worded differently.
Okay. Yep. And I know I popped into one group that the person was reading and he was like, oh, darn, I should have switched. I should have done this thing to my draft. And I'm like, you still can. That's the point of reading out loud. Like when you notice something, make a note of it. And that's the beauty of it not being finished is that you can literally change whatever it is you want to. A couple other things that I was pushed a couple people on in listening to the feedback is any feedback that comes with an explanation is critical feedback. So if you did like something that a person, the way they communicated something in their story, and you can tell them why, and especially if that why is connected to any of the content that we have out of our textbook, that is good critical feedback. So that's what you want to be able to do. But also, I'll just remind people, we do not have to like any of the stuff that we read because we're reading them like a writer. You just want to try to figure out how they're working, what does work and what may not work, so you can give people suggestions. And so for this next part, hopefully having listened to it will help you think about when you go to give this written feedback. First of all, you can read the paper out loud that you're giving feedback to. You don't have to read that in silence. Sometimes reading like for me, when I read things silently, it's very different from when I read them out loud. So if like I know in practice, if I'm going to give somebody feedback, I can give a better feedback if I read it out loud. But also if I read it twice. So reading it once through with no agenda, let me just read it and then see what my first impression is, what comes to my mind, very much like you did the Pringle piece. And then reading the second time with that critical hat on, like, okay, now I need to give you some specific feedback. So those are my suggestions as we move into this second hour of class, giving written feedback. So what I'm going to ask you to do for the written part, because my directions online very much for doing things asynchronously offline, you're asked to give feedback to the two people who posted below you on Blackboard. Those are the directions there. And some of those people aren't in class today. Like someone's posted there, but they're not here today in class. So I still want them to be able to get feedback. So what I'm asking you to do though, is you're going to give written feedback to one of the people who was in your group tonight. So when I put you back into your small group of our bring, I'm just gonna look at the groups and I see the other people are coming back now. So Larry, I forget you were in room 3. Okay.
Yeah, with Emily and
yeah.
Alex.
Okay. So I'm just gonna go with the first group. So my first group was like Corey, Matson, and Tara. So in that group, if you could imagine if you're sitting in a classroom and you're in a circle and you do a round robin, basically you would just take your physical paper and give it to the person to your left. So now you have someone paper who's physically here, who's actually here tonight. You're going to give that person feedback. The second person you're going to give feedback to is going to be one of the people online who posted beneath you. no matter who that person is. So that's how you're going to get your 2 peer reviews done. Tara, I see your hand. What's your question?
Yeah, so Corey can't open my paper, but Matson and other people that have can. I don't know what to do about that.
Well, only one person in your group is going to review your paper in the group tonight. So I would say it wouldn't be the person who can't open it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that's what you just make sure that's not the person who gets your paper tonight. Like I can go around do this and say like, Corey, you will open, like you do this person, but I mean, I'm just going to stick you all in your group and decide who's going to do the other person's paper in class tonight. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to make sure you can do a peer review of a paper that you heard because you're here physically in class tonight. And then the other paper you're going to do for the next 20 minutes or so of class time is going to be one of the 2 people who post it on Blackboard beneath your name. That's how you're going to get your 2 done. What level of confusion does anyone have about that?
So I suppose, just to be clear, so our 2, the ones that are going to count for our grade are going to be the one that we do tonight in our group and the person below us. So instead of doing the 2 people below us, now we're just going to do 1 person below us and that's it.
And 1 person who's actually in your group tonight, because I want you to be able to give review of a paper that you heard. So
gotcha. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And if everyone were here tonight, this wouldn't be an issue, but they're not. So, and it's probably never going to be that way. But and also there are people, I think there's like at least 1 or 2 people here tonight who doesn't have a paper posted at all. If you're in that situation, you can give feedback to any 2 people just because you get your points by giving feedback. So that's how you earn your peer review points, is by looking at other people's writing and talking about giving them those suggestions. Before I send you off, I do want to just point out those 9 points that you have to make on a document, and this is actually on their document. Do not make your comments in a separate document and upload it. You have to download the person's paper, and you are going to physically put your comments in there. Your comments just needs to be saved in their paper in some obvious way that they know this is you talking, and it doesn't blend in with their paper. So you can use a comment feature. You can use highlight a different color, bold. It essentially is. In the olden days, you'd have somebody's paper in front of you and you will have your pen or pencil and you're writing right on it. That is what we're doing, but you're downloading their paper and you're typing your comments into it so that they can see what you're talking about in different parts of their paper. So there are 9 things I ask you to do. The first thing I suggest you do, especially with the person's paper that's on Blackboard that you may not have heard, read it, just read through it, and then write down your first impression, and then go back to it a second time and start looking for things that you can say. So people have been invited to add a challenging issue. So when you open their document, if they have at the top of their paper, that's where it should be. If they have written a challenging issue, before you call your review done, try to address it. You may not have an answer for it, but that doesn't stop you from trying to address their most challenging issue. You could address their challenging issue like, I have the same problem. Maybe we should ask Professor Muhammad about this particular issue or go to the writing lab. But you don't have to have an answer if they posted that challenging issue, but you should try to address it. So that's 2 things, your first impression, and at some point, if they put a most challenging issue, you try to address it. And then you're going to add, I think, 6 other comments in that document. And those comments could be a combination of things that you think that work well, questions. You can say, hey, I understood the way you describe people in paragraphs 2 and 6, but the description in other areas doesn't isn't as sharp or, isn't as clear. So maybe you can borrow from what works well. Just a combination of any comments that will force that writer to think about the decisions that they made based on what you understand the techniques and tools they have from the chapters to get this writing done. So 6 of those things. So that's, and then the last thing is your final comments. Like overall, what's the last thing you can leave these people, the people with? And so there should be, I think, a total of 9 points on their documents. 6, 7, 8. Yeah. So first impression, if they had a challenging question or issue, and if they didn't, just say, they didn't post a challenging issue, 6 other things, and then your final comments. But you want to try to give those comments in the context of the writing choices that we have, from narration, description, and reflection. That's what you're doing. So you save their document, and then you're going to go back to Blackboard, or hit the reply button underneath the person's name and upload your paper, and you're done. And then we will come back to class at 8:45. What is that, 7? Yeah. I suggest, depending on how long you can see the 2 people's papers you're dealing with, you spend anywhere from 20 minutes to maybe a half hour, kind of divvy up your time, and make sure you give yourself a break. And we come back to class. Well, actually at like 8:50, we will debrief, and then I'll talk about what that next step is, which is the peer review memo. So if you get done with your peer reviews early, go ahead and look at the second part of the peer review handout sheet for what that memo is, because when we come back, I'm going to debrief about that and the next steps. Corey?
I'm about to sound really old. How do you edit a PDF document?
You don't, because no one should submit a PDF. So this is why I'm like, you have to submit like a Word doc, because you can't unless you have some special powers on your computer, and most people don't. So I'm going to pause this right here. All right, so welcome back. That was, for all clunkiness or not, the first peer review. So one of the things I want to remind people, that our peer review is not an editing session. We're not editing or proofreading. That's not what we're doing. Actually, editing and proofreading would come after the type of peer review we're doing. We're doing critical feedback to actually look at the structure and the format of the type of writing you're doing, which is first person reflective writing. It doesn't have, like, it's not an academic essay. It's more of a personal story. So we're looking at the structure of it and how to build this particular type of writing, thinking about those techniques as like actual building blocks. So we're not editing as in grammar, mechanics, and proofreading, which is why none of the instructions for giving critical feedback ever asks you to talk to people about their grammar and mechanics. Truthfully, we can get feedback on grammar mechanics just by turning on the grammar check if you're using Word or Google Docs, or if you use Grammarly, which is this online version to check grammar and style. However, those programs cannot help you with like thought and cohesiveness. And if your story is developing between the choices you have to show, tell, chronological order, it can't help with that. We still need human beings to help with that part. So when I am looking to give when I am grading the peer review feedback, one of the things that will cause you not to get full credit is if there's a significant portion of your comments that are all grammar mechanics, because you were not asked to do that. And it's easy to fall back on grammar mechanics. So I just want to get you pushed to think that this kind of critical review is different from the editing work that we may be used to doing. And I hope you experience that difference. Also, the reason you're asked to give feedback to two different people and receive feedback from two different people is because you want different perspectives. And not any one person is going to tell you everything you need. This is not a session to fix things. This is a session to help you think about the choices you make. So if you actually got two pieces of, two reviews, so you have those two, and then you have the two that you gave feedback to. So you actually have 4 different points of experiences in talking about this type of writing to think about what kind of choices you make between today and when you turn it in. So it's not only thinking about the feedback you got, but you're thinking about the feedback that you gave other people, what you saw going on in other people's paper, in addition to what they gave, in addition to what you received. So when you take all of that, hopefully that is enough feedback for you to consider what kinds of changes you may make in your document. And then you have one other experience. So you actually have 5 points. The other experience is the fact that you read papers aloud and you listen to other people. So you have multiple points of thinking through what you might bring back to the revision process of your paper. Can I get any thoughts on all that I just said? I'm not asking for questions. I'm asking, like, how are you understanding this?
So I, when I did my peer review, I did comment on some grammar mechanics. Would it be okay if I went and redid it and reposted it?
Yes, you can do that. And again, and I will be looking at the full 9 points. That's the first thing I'm looking like. Are there 9 comments on here? And then, 3 of them would be your before and after. What I really get nervous about is especially those 6 comments that should be in the paper. And this is all minimum because you could say more. Now, if you gave more than 6 comments in the paper and some of those are grammar, okay. But if the majority of what you're doing is grammar, that isn't particularly helpful for this stage of the writing. That's what I want people. Now, if a grammar issue is so egregious that you can't get through it, yes, you should say something about it. But that shouldn't be the depth of your feedback. So, and I don't want you to get overly concerned, like, oh, I got to go back and redo everything. Like, if most of your comments is grammar feedback, then yeah, it's just not helpful for what people need to do at this point.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Other people, I'm looking for how you are processing what I'm saying to you in these last few minutes about how this peer review stuff is working.
I have a format question.
Mm-hmm.
So I had posted the wrong format, but I still got my peer reviews. Do you want me to copy and paste those onto a Word document?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So when I originally posted mine, I accidentally posted the wrong ones. I did pages instead of docs. So my peer reviews, I got them and they're on pages, but for you to see them, would it be helpful if I went through and copy and pasted those and put them on a docs format for you?
Well, no, as long as your peer reviewers were able to open it, I think that's a lucky break this time because they must have Apple or something. But most of the times, like next time around, you may get people who don't have an Apple computer and so wouldn't be able to open it. So
right, I just need to double check that next time for sure.
Yes. So if you successfully got 2 feedback, okay, that's fine. I actually work on any kind of computer that's in front of me. So sometimes I'm on my Apple, sometimes I'm on my PC, and and most people can open Word no matter what. So that's why I actually just posted that announcement for all of my classes. I'm like, look, people, Word is preferred. Yes, it's just the to go to, and you do have a link to download, access the cloud version of Word is in the syllabus. And So I'm glad you brought this up, because I did want to just remind people, because I'm just like you in some respects. Like when I get ready to sit down and do some work and I have a chunk of 3 hours, like I'm gonna like grade all this stuff right now as much as I can in 3 hours. And when I come against something that I can't open, I mean, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to come back and figure out how to down and do this. So you don't want to put those kind of obstacles out there. So if you are, I have nothing against people using Google Docs, but if you are using Google Docs, you need to make sure you know how to set it, set the permissions so that it's accessible already, so people don't have to ask you for a request to edit. And so if you know how to do that, I mean, I'm not against, think Google Docs is the next most accessible one. But if you're using Google Docs, you need to make sure it's set for anyone with this link and use that version so that people can open it. This is the first time around that I've had so many people have issues with RTF files, but apparently that is an issue. So I prefer Word because, and definitely never any PDFs, because you can't do anything. You can't get into a PDF file. Again, if I'm on my work computer, I can convert it. And I did that for a couple people in this class, but that's not really helpful for their classmates. So it's frustrating, but it's important to remember. So try to use Word. If you are using Google Docs, make sure it's already set that people can edit it. Just make sure it can be accessible. But that's like a logistical thing that would just throw off you getting feedback, because personally for me, the worst thing is if I have reviews from people and I can't open them. That's so frustrating. Like I can't get to it. So it's really no good for anyone if you can't. So you can also help with this if when you see things are posted in their peer reviews, like you should have access to, I'm going to share my screen. Should have access to, like, you can email each other. If you see that, it's part of our learning community to let your classmates know, like, oh, I can't open this document. Just shoot them an email and say, hey, I'm having problems. I can't open this document. Could you get it posted? That's helpful because I'm not always going to see it. But today I did. So let each other know. And then if you are an Apple person, it's easy to forget. But I know when you're using Word, when you're using Google Docs, you can download from Google Docs in different formats. And if you don't know how to do that, go to YouTube or see me during office hours, but you can literally download. And I do believe usually from at least my Apple computer, I never use Pages though, but if I did, I can download it in Word. So that's just a logistical thing that we just want to get worked out so we don't have hiccups like we did today. So now the idea is between today, 11:59 p.m., because even your classmates who aren't here, they have until 11:59 to upload their responses. But I also want you to keep in mind that when you look at the feedback, actually, I would just say, go ahead and say, I'm going to get feedback from my classmates, but I already know I want to get feedback from either the instructor, build in time, talk to a writing tutor or someone else. Because this feedback is a learning experience. It is not there to make your essay better. I mean, it's not a guarantee to do that because everyone's new and it's a learning process. And so that's why I say you have 5 points to look at: the 2 reviews that you gave, the 2 reviews that you received, and the read aloud portion in class. All of those notes come together, and you should go back and look at the writing techniques. And I'm sharing my screen. You can also look at the rubric for this. I'm going to go to grades. This is a quick way to see the rubrics and what rubrics are listed. So come on, grades. And so when you submit Project 1 grading draft, you can look at the rubric ahead of time. So if I click on that, this says an overview of what you should, a very brief overview of what you're writing. and then what will be evaluated. This too is a really good resource as you're revising your paper. It's a good resource when you're even giving feedback, but you had enough stuff to look at for feedback. So you can look at the rubric. So any task here, when you go into grades, if there's a rubric, you can go ahead and open it and check it out. And that is useful as you think about how this document is going to be evaluated. But the other thing that you have to write, and this is what I call the invisible parts of the writing process, parts that we don't normally think about. So you got a bunch of feedback going on. How are you actually going to use that? How does your instructor know you're using any of that feedback? Can anybody help me out? Like, how would I know if you're actually using any of the feedback that happened tonight?
Because you'll see it change from our first draft to our final product.
That is the absolute hope. But guess what? Often I don't see any changes. Sometimes I don't see any changes. And if in the absence of any change, I'm like, well, did they look at the feedback and just were like, oh, my classmates are just on a whole nother planet. I didn't take any of that feedback. I still wouldn't know that they looked at the feedback. So I wouldn't know unless you tell me. And so the draft review memo that I have you write is that stopping point that makes you go back and, obviously tell the instructor, this is the stuff I looked at. This is what I'm thinking. And if your paper still looks exactly the same, you will have written this memo to tell me, I looked at all the feedback that I got and it was not, I didn't agree with this point. I didn't agree with the fact that, I didn't make a good picture of the relationship between me and my first pet that X told me. So I decided not to make that change. That is all perfect. You can decide not to make any changes, but as the person who's evaluating your final draft, it's important for me to know your decision-making process. And so that is one of the reasons you write this draft review memo, because you're going to tell me stuff about the feedback you gave, the feedback you received, and what you are doing with it, did with it, or plan on doing with it. And that's how I really know. So now I'll have three things. I'll have the draft, I'll have this memo in the middle, and then I'll have your final on the other end. And then I can actually have a better picture of the writing decisions that each person made. And so that's how I know for sure you're at least looking at it. And this also hopefully will make people go back and look at their feedback a little bit sooner than like the day before something is due. And then maybe you will go ahead and like, hey, I want to go ahead and go to drop-in hours at the writing lab, because I want to talk about, how I could be more descriptive, because I'm doing a lot of telling. I'm doing a lot of reflective moments. And then maybe I want to work with somebody specifically on that. So thinking about your time and where you may go for help. So those first two areas I ask you to tell me about is the feedback you gave others. And that will include in everything, even in what you recall from the listening part. So everyone, as soon as you can, you should think about what you saw and experienced and talked about in round one listening. You have your notes, and you can go back to Blackboard for round two if you need to do that. That's why you uploaded your documents there. And then I asked you some prompts about the feedback you received. And the memo is not meant that you have to answer each one of these questions, but it is the context. You should talk about the feedback you gave and how that is helping you think about your writing. The feedback you received, and how does that help you think about your writing and your decision making. This third area here, and this says that people will go to other places to get feedback. You're not required to do that. I strongly suggest you get feedback from other sources, because there are sources you have that I don't know about. There are sources that people like to use instead of this process we did in class, but I say you have to do the process in class, and this is additional sources. So any additional sources that you're using. So yeah, now if your cousin Elroy is going to read your paper, okay, fine, because I'm assuming you have a reason for why you're selecting these other sources to give you feedback. The writing lab, your instructor. So if you are using other sources, they shouldn't be ignored because you're using that feedback to help think about your choices. And so you're going to tell me that in your memo too, like if you went to other sources. If you didn't go to other sources, you will say, I didn't use any other sources for whatever reason for this time around. But you don't want to ignore, just skip over this part. The last part I ask you is your overall experience of this sort of exchange and looking at, a not quite finished final version of your document. I asked you how you spent your time, what learning outcomes, at least 2 of the learning outcomes. Again, these are listed in the syllabus. They're in those weekly reflective activities you do. That is helping you think about your writing skills, that you're hopefully gaining a better understanding for some of those course learning outcomes. So these are prompts that I ask you to address, and you may address all of them, you may only address some of them, but these are the 4 areas that I ask you to talk about for each after peer review time. So you're going to do this 2 more times for the 3 projects. So any comments about this? Like the reason why? It's not that I don't trust you all. We want to be very deliberate and manual at this point about how the writing is getting produced.
Will this assignment just be posted? Like when I was looking at where this was posted, it looked like it was put in an email to you, but this is just going to be submitted to the Blackboard.
No, this is
link,
an
correct?
this is an assignment that comes directly to me. If anything's gonna go on on Blackboard in like the discussion board area, discussion board is usually orange. If you're not colorblind, I'm sorry, but it'll be in the discussion board area. But this is an assignment and it'll usually say submit. So that comes directly to me.
Great, thank you.
No, you naming names in this piece. So no, you submit it right here and it looks different. So if I clicked on here, that's an actual submission. It comes directly to the instructor. And you can see the rubric here too. See how many points, and there's a rubric about, how I'm going to evaluate that particular document. So no, that comes directly to me, your paper, final paper. Some of these things are assignments, and it'll say, this is an assignment. When you are going into discussion board, you should be able to start to see the differences. So discussion boards, it'll say discussion board. So this is discussion board, everyone can see. Assignments are just me. Get out of my way. Want this. So back to this document. So that's the reason I asked you to do that. Like, it might seem irritating now, but it's really helpful to force people to think about what changes they might make. And actually it helps people get better at the critique and peer review process. So it's a helpful document. The other reason I have you write a memo is it allows you to practice another type of personal correspondence. This would be in the realm of semi-professional or business world. So in the business world, people write memos all the time. They write reports, but a memo is one of those standard genres of writing, and memos are designed to deliver information. No fluff, no anything. People want to know information, and that's why we write memos, is to deliver that content. And that's what I want. I want all the facts and thinking about what you experience in this memo. So it's more direct. And so people who like the more direct writing, you get this opportunity to practice memo writing again, which is under the realm of like personal correspondence. Corey, question?
Where is this handout located? This peer review direct memo handout located?
It is in the same document, the peer review memo, the peer review process. I'm just gonna go to course docs, the peer review process. I should have went the other way. So what right here. Peer review handout is 6 pages. Okay. Open it. The first 2 pages is like the peer review job description with the 9 points. If you keep scrolling, the last 3 pages is the memo, because it's all part of one process. So and you just want to download that. And this is what you're going to do for each of the 3 projects. But the other reason I was saying is this is a form of writing, and our emails are based on memos. That's why you have 2 from date. And I'm just going to scroll down to this second pages. The 4th, 5th page is an example peer review memo. I want to draw your attention that this example is for a research project. It's similar to the 3rd project you're doing. It requires a lot of research. So that's why this memo is long. It's like a page and almost a page and a half. And how long your memo is really depends on how much information you need to deliver. The first one people do is usually just some, so a few paragraphs, and it usually doesn't go past a page just because it's the first time people are doing it. It's also a way to figure out how you are going to divvy up how you're going to talk about the feedback you gave and you received. So, I mean, some people talk about that per person. Some people group things together, like, 3 people told me that I had, I didn't have enough description in the middle around the main event. And this is what those 3 people said. So it's also a way to see how people are going to organize the content that they got to help me understand your decision-making process. But generally the first sections will be, the first paragraph or few will be about the feedback that you gave, the next group of paragraphs, the feedback you received. So there still should be clear sections. Just because there are 4 areas, I'll go back up here. Just because there are 4 prompt areas does not mean that's going to translate into 4 paragraphs. This is also just a way to try to see how people divvy up how you organize information, because I just need it. So that's the peer review, the draft review memo. And I see it is 9:15 and I got lost. All right, it might different tabs that are open. So I just went back to week 4. We're done, or by 11:59 p.m. you'll have everything updated here. If you want that bonus point activity, you will post a personal correspondence letter, and then you get started working on your draft review memo and your final draft. If you put paragraph numbers in your draft review memo, in your draft, it'd be nice if you take them out for the final version. It won't kill me if they're still in there. But if you take them out, that'd be nice. And so by Sunday, you will submit those 2 documents. You should finish. If you stayed on this, you just have to post your synthesis post for the mini lessons. And then the reflective activity, which is worth bonus points this week around, is slightly different. It'll appear after 11:59 p.m. tonight. I just set it to appear later because, again, I don't want people reflecting before they actually do stuff. And then there's a look ahead to next week. And week 5 is actually available. I think if you have them on, there's one other thing in grades I just want to show people. So the reflective tasks, I actually can't show you because I didn't do any of them. But the reflective tasks, the one that you're doing this week, it actually asks you to look back at how you responded to the previous reflective tasks. And in order to do that, it's very clunky on Blackboard. But if you want to see your previous responses, you literally have to come to grades. You have to click on the actual reflective task you completed. I can't show you because I didn't complete any of them. But you have to click directly on it. It'll open, and then you can get back in and see. It's very clunky here on Blackboard, but yeah. So that reflective task will be worth bonus points. So yeah, that's all I got. And I went 2 minutes over. Thank you for giving me that 2 minutes. Don't forget to post your exit comments before you leave.